They thought it was a game, harass the waitress, humiliate her. Then they poured boiling hot coffee on her and held her down so she couldn't escape. It was the biggest mistake of their lives, because in the corner, a switch flipped. A Navy SEAL and his combat dog were done watching. And what happened next was more brutal and more just than you can possibly imagine. You need to see the look on their faces when they realize who they've just messed with. Subscribe now. Clara had been a waitress at the Lonesome Pine Diner for 3 years. It was a place frozen in time, a beacon of warmth in the dark red vinyl booths, chrome stools that spun with a satisfying squeak, a black and white checkered floor worn soft by a million footsteps. The air usually smelled of greasy burgers, strong coffee, and apple pie. It was her sanctuary. She was 22, saving every tip for community college, dreaming of becoming a teacher. She loved the quiet, graveyard shift, the long-haul truckers who called her darlin', the elderly couples who held hands over coffee, the quiet solitude of the pre-dawn hours. It was a life of quiet dignity, of small hopes stacked carefully one upon the other. Tonight, that stack came crashing down. The 3 young men had swaggered in an hour ago, loud and boisterous, their varsity jackets announcing their status as local gods. Football players, they'd slid into her section, booth number 4, and from the start, it was a game of subtle taunts. Hey, sweetheart, you got a boyfriend. This coffee tastes like mud. You gonna make me a fresh pot with a smile? She'd borne it with the practiced, wary patience of someone used to being invisible. She refilled their coffees, took their order for 3 Grand Slam breakfasts, and tried to make herself small. But making yourself small doesn't work when the predators are looking for easy prey. It escalated when she brought their food. One of them, the ringleader, a guy with a cruel twist to his mouth named Brad, accidentally knocked his orange juice onto the floor. Oops, clumsy me. You gonna get that, sweetheart? She did. On her hands and knees, mopping up the sticky liquid with a rag, she felt their eyes on her, heard their low, appreciative chuckles. It was when she stood up that Brad grabbed her wrist. His grip was strong, meant to hurt. Hey, he said, his voice dropping to a false, intimate tone. We're bored. You gonna entertain us? Maybe a little dance. I bet you got some moves. But she tried to pull away. Please let me go. I have other customers. That was the wrong thing to say. It challenged their perceived dominance. The other 2, his lackeys, Mitch and Derek, were out of the booth in an instant. They flanked her, each taking an arm. Panic, cold and sharp, began to replace the wary annoyance in her chest. Let me go, she said, her voice rising, cracking with fear. Brad stood up, looming over her. He picked up his coffee mug. It was still half full, steaming. You know, he said, his voice conversational, you're right. The service here is pretty cold. I think you need to warm up. That's when he poured it. Slowly at first, a trickle onto her apron, a dark stain blooming. She gasped, flinching back, but his friends held her fast. Then he tilted the mug further, and the full, scalding stream hit her chest, soaking through the thin cotton of her uniform. A strangled cry escaped her lips. The heat was immense, a shocking, painful brand of humiliation. The laughter erupted around her, loud, brutish, and empty. They didn't see the man in the corner. Nobody ever did at first. He was a part of the shadows, a silent monument in a booth by the large picture window. He wore faded digital camo pants and a plain gray t-shirt, his posture ramrod straight even in relaxation. A German shepherd, a majestic animal with intelligent, watchful eyes, lay perfectly still at his feet under the table. The man's name was Jake. He had been watching the entire scene unfold with the calm, analytical focus of a predator assessing a threat. His hands, resting on the formica table, were still, but his eyes, a cool, flinty gray, had narrowed, missing nothing. He had come in an hour before the boys, ordering a black coffee and a slice of pie he'd only taken 2 bites of. He was a ghost, a man passing through, wanting only silence in the road. The dog, whose name was Rex, was a retired military working dog, a veteran of 3 tours himself. They were a team bound by things neither could speak of, 2 old soldiers trying to find a quiet place in a loud world. Jake had seen the boys come in. He'd seen their swagger, heard their loud, privileged voices. He'd seen the way they looked at Clara, the way they diminished her with their eyes. He'd made a conscious choice to stay out of it. Not your fight, Jake. She's a civilian. They're just kids. Loud, obnoxious kids. He'd told himself all the things you tell yourself to avoid the storm you know is coming. But when Brad grabbed her wrist, Jake's right hand had curled into a fist, the knuckles white. When they held her down, a low, almost imperceptible growl rumbled from under the table. Rex felt the change in his partner's posture, the minute tightening of the muscles in his leg. And when the coffee was poured, when Clara's cry of pain and shame cut through the diner, something in Jake broke. It wasn't anger. Not anger was too hot, too chaotic. What settled over him was a profound glacial calm, a purpose. It was the same feeling he'd get before a room clearance, a moment of hyper clarity where the world slowed down and every variable became a piece on a chessboard. He didn't stand up. Not yet, he spoke. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the laughter like a scalpel. Let her go. The three boys turned, their smug faces a mixture of surprise and irritation. They saw a man, maybe in his mid-30s, with a weathered face and a quiet intensity. He didn't look particularly big. Sitting down, he just looked calm. Brad, recovering his bravado, puffed out his chest. "What did you say, old man? This doesn't concern you. Why don't you finish your pie and mind your own business?" Jakey's eyes didn't leave Brad's. "I said, let the young lady go. And then you're going to apologize to her." Mitch, one of the boys holding Clara, sneered. "Or what? You and your mutt gonna do something about it?" At the word mutt, Rex's head lifted from the floor, his ears pricked forward. Jake gave a barely perceptible signal with his hand, and the dog settled, but his eyes were now fixed on the three boys with an unnerving focus. Jake slowly, deliberately, slid out of the booth. He stood to his full height, and the boys, for the first time, seemed to register the breadth of his shoulders, the way he carried himself, not like a brawler but like a weapon. He took 2 steps forward, stopping a good 10 feet from them. He wasn't trying to intimidate them with proximity. His presence was intimidation enough. "Last chance," Jake said, his voice still dangerously quiet. "Let her go, apologize, and pay your bill. Then walk out of here." Brad laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. He shoved Clara away from him, and she stumbled back against the counter, clutching her scalded chest, sobbing quietly. The three boys now faced Jake, forming a loose semi-circle. They were big kids, used to winning through mass and aggression. "You think you can take all 3 of us, tough guy?" Brad said, taking a step forward. "I don't want to," Jake replied, his gaze sweeping over them, assessing, categorizing. Brad, the leader, all ego. Mitch, the follower, all brute strength. Derek, the third, already looking unsure, his eyes darting towards the door. "But if you force the issue, it won't be a fight. It will be a lesson." That was the final straw for Brad. His ego couldn't take it. With a roar of pure, unthinking rage, he charged, swinging a wild, telegraphed haymaker aimed at Jake's head. What happened next was so fast, so brutally efficient, that Clara, watching through her tears, barely processed it. Jake didn't retreat, he moved in. He deflected the punch with his left forearm, the movement minimal, almost casual. At the same time, his right hand shot out, not in a fist, but with his fingers stiffened, striking Brad precisely in the solar plexus. It wasn't a knockout punch. It was a shutdown. All the air left Brad's lungs in a pained whoosh. His eyes bulged, his charge turning into a forward collapse as he clutched his stomach, gagging and gasping for air that wouldn't come. He was neutralized, reduced to a writhing, helpless mess on the checkered floor. The diner was silent except for Brad's choked gasps. The entire confrontation had taken less than 2 seconds. Mitch, seeing his leader fall, bellowed and lunged. He was bigger, slower. Jake sidestepped the lunge, hooked his foot behind Mitch's ankle, and used the boy's own momentum to send him crashing heavily into a nearby table. Plates and silverware clattered to the floor. Before Mitch could even register what had happened, Jake was on him, not with strikes, but with control. He twisted Mitch's arm into a secure lock behind his back, applying precise pressure. "Stay down," Jake commanded, his voice still calm, but now with an edge of steel that brooked no argument. Mitch, his face pressed against the sticky floor, whimpered in pain and shock. Derek, the third boy, had frozen. He hadn't moved from his spot. His hands were half raised in surrender, his face a mask of pure terror. He looked from the gasping Brad to the pinned Mitch, and then to Jake, whose flinty eyes now settled on him. Jake didn't even have to speak. Derek slowly, carefully, got down on his knees and put his hands behind his head, as if he'd seen it in a movie. The fight, if it could even be called that, was over. It was then that the diner's front door chimed. A state trooper, A large, capable-looking man in his 40s named Officer Miller walked in for his usual late-night coffee. He took in the scene in an instant: the sobbing waitress with a coffee-stained uniform, the three high school jocks, one gasping on the floor, one pinned in an arm lock, one kneeling in surrender, and the calm, camo-clad man standing in the center of it all. Officer Miller's hand went to his sidearm. "Everybody freeze!" What in God's name is going on here? Clara found her voice first, her sobs turning into ragged, urgent words. "They attacked me! They held me down and poured hot coffee on me!" He helped me. She pointed a trembling finger at Jake. Jake, seeing the officer slowly and deliberately, released Mitch's arm, standing up and taking a step back, his hands visible and open at his sides. He gave a slight, almost invisible signal, and Rex, who had emerged from under the table but remained perfectly still, lay back down. Officer Miller's eyes scanned the room, piecing it together. He saw the empty mug, the stain on Clara's uniform, the terror on her face, the sheer dominance of the quiet man. He focused on the boys. "Brad Jenkins, Mitch Thompson, is this true?" Brad, still wheezing, could only nod weakly. Mitch, rubbing his shoulder, just stared at the floor. Derek, from his knees, started crying. "We're sorry. We were just messing around. Have he attacked us?" he blubbered, pointing at Jake. Officer Miller looked at Jake. "Sir, I'm going to need you to tell me your side of it." Jake met his gaze evenly. "Officer, the young lady is telling the truth. They assaulted her. I intervened to stop the assault. I used the minimum force necessary to neutralize the threat." The way he spoke, neutralize the threat, coupled with his bearing, clicked something into place for Officer Miller. He looked at Jake, really looked at him. The short, cropped hair, the calm under pressure, the efficient, non-lethal takedowns. He glanced at the German shepherd, whose disciplined posture was anything but that of a pet. "Are you currently serving, son?" Miller asked, his tone shifting from suspicion to something closer to respect. "Formerly, sir," Jake replied. "Naval Special Warfare." A slow nod from the officer. "I see." He turned back to the boys, his expression hardening. "All right, you three, on your feet. You have the right to remain silent." He began Mirandizing them as he cuffed Brad and Mitch, then Derek. The fight had completely drained out of them, replaced by the cold, hard reality of handcuffs and a criminal charge. As Officer Miller led the three shame-faced boys out to his cruiser, the diner fell into a profound silence. The only sounds were the hum of the neon sign outside and Clara's ragged breathing. She was leaning against the counter, trembling uncontrollably, the adrenaline crash hitting her full force. Jake walked over to her, his movements slow and non-threatening. He didn't try to touch her. He simply stood a few feet away, his presence a solid, calming anchor. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice now soft, the steel gone from it. She shook her head, fresh tears welling up. "I don't know. It burns." He nodded. "We need to get that cooled down." He moved to the soda fountain, filled a clean bus tub with cold water, and grabbed a stack of clean napkins. He brought them over to her. "Here, press these against it. It will help." His kindness, after the violence and the cruelty, was what finally broke her. She sobbed, great, heaving sobs of relief and delayed terror. He let her cry, standing guard, a silent sentinel in the wreckage of her evening. When Officer Miller returned, he took statements from both Clara and Jake. He confirmed there were security cameras that had captured the entire event. "This is open and shut," he told Clara. "Assault, unlawful restraint, they'll be facing charges. And you, Master Chief," he said to Jake, "you acted as a textbook Good Samaritan. No charges will be filed against you. In fact, the department will be thanking you." Jake just nodded. Titles and thanks meant little to him. After the officer left, promising to send a paramedic to check on Clara, an awkward silence fell. The diner was a mess: overturned table, broken plates, the lingering stench of fear, and spilled coffee. "I should clean this up," Clara whispered, her voice hoarse. "No," Jake said firmly. "You should sit down." He guided her to a booth, then, to her astonishment, he started cleaning. He righted the table, picked up the broken ceramic, mopped the floor with the efficiency that spoke of a lifetime of discipline. Rex followed him, a quiet, comforting shadow. Clara watched him, this strange, quiet man who had descended into her nightmare like an avenging angel and was now mopping her floor. "Who are you?" she finally asked. He stopped his work and looked at her. "My name is Jake." "That's Rex." "Thank you, Jake," she said, the words feeling inadequate for the debt she felt. "You didn't have to." You could have gotten hurt. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. No, he said simply. I couldn't have. He finished cleaning and sat down across from her, not too close, giving her space. The paramedics arrived, checked her burn. It was red and painful, but thankfully not severe enough for a hospital trip, and applied a cooling gel and a bandage. As they were packing up, the diner door chimed again. An older man in his 60s, flustered and out of breath, rushed in. It was Al, the owner. My God, Clara! I got a call from the state police! What happened? Are you okay? He rushed to her side, his face a mask of concern. Clara explained the whole story, her voice growing stronger as she spoke, Jake's silent presence giving her the courage to tell it. Al listened, his face growing darker with every word. When she finished, he turned to Jake. Al said, his voice thick with emotion, I don't know what to say. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. You saved my girl. He looked around the spotless diner. And you cleaned up. It was the right thing to do, Jake said, uncomfortable with the praise. Nothing is on the house for you, ever again, Al declared. You hear me, for life. Jake gave a small, grateful nod. He stood up. I should be going. Wait, Clara said, standing as well. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. He stiffened for a second, surprised by the contact, then slowly, awkwardly, patted her back. It was the gesture of a man not used to human touch, but who understood its necessity. Thank you, she whispered into his shoulder. He simply nodded. He turned to leave, Rex falling into step beside him. As he reached the door, Clara called out one last time, Jacob. He paused, looking back. Where are you going? He looked out the window, at the dark, empty highway stretching into the unknown. Somewhere quiet? He said. And then he was gone, the door chiming softly behind him, swallowed by the night as if he were a dream. But he wasn't a dream. The bandage on Clara's chest was real. The absence of the bullies, facing the consequences of their actions, was real. And the feeling he left behind, a feeling of safety, of justice, of a restored faith in the world, that was the most real thing of all. She never saw him again. But sometimes on a quiet night at the Lonesome Pine, when the moon was high and the highway was silent, she would look at booth number 3 in the corner, and she would feel a sense of peace. The world had monsters, yes, but it also had guardians, quiet men with quiet dogs, who walked in shadows, ensuring that the light in the diner, and in the hearts of decent people, would never go out. This story is a reminder that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes, help arrives from the most unexpected places. The actions of one person can change the entire course of a day or a life. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Stories like this connect us all, no matter where we are. So, from which part of the country are you watching this video? Let me know in the comments below.